Welcome back to episode 2 of the Rizz Zone Fantasy Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Fantasy N, and I'm here with Kinc Chugs. This week, we'll be talking through today's games and everything that you need to know from a fantasy perspective. Kinc Chugs, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. We had an exciting Patriots game today. I cannot believe they didn't win. That blocked field goal, just really soul crushing. I was sick to my stomach. But other than that, great day of football and looking forward to breaking it down with you.
Couldn't be more excited. Could not be more excited. All right, let's get into it, Kinc Chugs.
Absolutely. Before we get down into our sharp analysis, we just wanted to go over something from last week's pod that I think might have gone over some of our viewers' heads. So last week we mentioned that we were going to pop Caminos, and we did. And if you were paying attention, we got progressively more baked throughout the show as the Caminos hit. And so this week, we just wanted to make it clear that at the start of every episode, we pop a Camino. And part of the appeal of this show is we have to race the clock and still think of sharp analysis for you all to win your fantasy matchup leagues while getting more and more baked. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. Got our Caminos right here, and time to pop.
Wow. What flavor are you munching on, Kinc Chugs?
Yeah, so I always go with the wild berry chills, 5 mgs. What about yourself?
I'm a strict advocate for the wild cherry excites. They just really get you going.
Oh yeah, no, I've had them before. They do feel really good, but I just like the relaxing, couch locking nature of the chills by Kiva. And
Understandable.
by the way, we're not sponsored by Camino by Kiva yet, but we're really looking forward to any opportunities that come our way. They have fantastic products. Everyone uses them, and we recommend that you all do too. But we have a few actual ad reads to get into, so go ahead and fantasy.
This week's episode is sponsored by Red Baron. Share something awesome. There's nothing better than sitting down on your couch after a long night rizzing at the bars, probably not getting yours, and cooking up a Red Baron for the slate. Those supreme pies just hit so nicely and they get nice and crisp for you to enjoy with your pals. Now tell me about something else, Kinc Chugs.
Absolutely. So again, we are still sponsored by Blue Chew. You want to get Blue Chew, you can click the link in the description below and really help your Rizz game when you bring him back after a long night of drinking at the bars. Everyone needs a little bit of help, and Blue Chew can help fill that gap for you. Great. Now we can get into the games. I know you're all excited to hear our sharp analysis, so let's go ahead and start with the Thursday night game. Bills going down to Miami. Huh. This was, yeah, this one was interesting to say the least. I mean, first and foremost, Tua, you got to slide, buddy. You got to slide. So, of course, that's a real shame, and we hope Tua's doing a little bit better and can get back out there. Aside from Tua, talk about James Cook. James Cook crushes it. 3 tugs. Goes crazy out there for you. And so you're just going to keep looking at him as kind of a low end RB1 and just keep starting him, keep collecting on that draft pick. Josh Allen, yeah, he didn't really need to do too much because the game was pretty much over at half. So just 140 yards and a tug. No rushing touchdowns. I think the hand was a little bit banged up. You saw that, right? Right, and fantasy, the 2 fingers
Yeah,
taped together.
yeah, I did see that. I did see that. It makes you wonder how much it really affected his game and how much they were using him from the rushing side of the offense. I'm sure they wanted to take it a little bit easy because, Josh Allen's the guy that's going to go out there and put his body on the line to get the Chigs back home. But this week, we didn't see too much of that from him, understandably. Now,
Yep.
I think we have to go back and talk about the elephant in the room. DeMar Hamlin murdering Tua. That is not ideal. Obviously, a guy like Jimison, who's going to pick Tua as his quarterback, you can't feel bad for him because the things he's done, can't really expect anything too good to go his way. But obviously, very unfortunate. especially that it had to come at the hands of Damar Hamlin, who literally died on the field, and now he had to get his revenge.
He definitely got his revenge on the football gods. Unfortunate it had to be Tua. So some things to keep in mind rest of season. Devon Achane will probably increase his role out of the backfield while Tua is potentially away. So that's great if you have Achane. He'll continue to be kind of a top 5 option for you at the running back position. And then on the receiver side, Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill had very underwhelming games and potentially lost you your matchup. And yeah, without Tua, depending on what happens at that quarterback position, you just gonna have to lower your expectations from those 2 star receivers. And then just on the Buffalo side, wanted to touch on Keon Coleman getting one target, 0 catches, 0 yards. So not sure what to do with these receivers outside of Dalton Kincaid, who looked a little bit better this past week. So just go ahead and keep starting my best boy, Dalton Kincaid. That's all on the Bills Dolphins side. Go ahead and move along. Go ahead.
One quick thing before we go. You can't put too much stock into the receiving game for the Bills in this game. They were running the ball the entire time. It was working so well. They were up bigly for pretty much the entire game. So I don't think you can really say that, Khalil Shakir or Keon Coleman, you can't really write them off. So again, more of a wait and see type thing. This game can't really be used as any sort of basis. So let's move on.
Thanks for that sharp analysis and fantasy. That's why we pay you the big bucks. Moving along to the Chargers visiting Carolina. Just sad. I honestly hope none of you even watch this game and we could provide some new insights around what an absolutely awful performance baby hands Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers put on. So starting with the Carolina Panthers, all I'm going to say is this guy's a total bust. We're going to say it again. He throws for 84 yards off 26 passes and 1 pick. So just do not start anyone in Carolina. Don't even roster them. Go ahead and cut Deontay Johnson. That's sad. You took him pretty high, but just cut him. And then I'll let you talk about your Chargers. By the way, are you still a Chargers fan or kind of confused?
I've been a Chargers fan my whole life, Chugs. I'm surprised to hear you say that, to be quite honest. I mean, we've got guys out there like J.K. Dobbins. Jim Harbaugh changed this offense entirely. J.K. Dobbins coming out there, reviving his career, 2 games in a row with 100-plus rushing yards. I saw a stat where they haven't had anyone since Melvin Gordon get out there and rush for 100 yards for 2 games in a row since Melvin Gordon. That's incredible. This Chargers rushing offense has been terrible for years. Austin Eckler was fine. He just was never actually that good of a back. Good pass catcher, great fantasy. Just wasn't actually that good. Another takeaway from this game. I mean, J.K. Dobbins, obviously, great stat line. 17 carries, 131 yards at a tug. That's great. Gus Edwards, not great. 18 carries, 59 yards. I think you're going to continue to see him be the second option there. They're still going to pound the rock a lot, but Gus Edwards is just not getting it done. I don't think you can really even, unless you're Creepy Keith and you only drafted 2 running backs, and one of them being CMC, who is now out for at least 4 weeks, looking more like 6 if you believe Twitter. You can't really start Gus Edwards. He's not a great back. I'll hand it back over to you, King Chugs. Anything to add there?
Not too much. Go ahead and drop Gus Edwards or try to fleece someone and throw him in the end of a trade. But definitely going to have to start J.K. Dobbins moving forward in your lineup, depending on your depth, of course. But he looks really good, and we expect him to continue to expand that role in the backfield and absolutely clean up for you. Wanted to quickly note on QJ, Quentin Johnston, 5 receptions, 50 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So I can't imagine QJ is rostered in a lot of leagues. So consider picking him up just because they don't really have a lot of other options in this Chargers receiving room. But again, they're playing the Panthers. So kind of up to you whether you think that QJ has any potential. I personally do not. So that's everything coming out of Charlotte, the Queen City today. miserable performance. Hopefully none of you watched again. Now we're going to move it over and talk about Duval. Yes, the Cleveland Browns go down to Jacksonville and get the job done. Again, I really hope none of you watched this game, but it was pretty bad. Do not start Trevor Lawrence. You can start Etienne. He's all right. And you can probably look to actually sit on Brian Thomas Jr. Definitely a great talent, and 2 catches for 94 yards today, including a 66-yard ball. So he has that big playability and looks to be a wide receiver 1 in that offense moving forward. Moving over to the Browns. God, Sean Watson is absolutely miserable. He's a miserable prick. More allegations coming out. He looked better, but still awful. So you just don't want to start any of the Cleveland players outside of potentially Jerome Ford if you need a little bit of depth right now. He gets 64 yards, just 1 catch. So not a great day, but has a lot of the work coming out of that backfield. Anything else on this absolutely horrible game down in Duval?
Yeah, I mean, not too much to add. Both of these teams are absolute aids. Amari Cooper, huge letdown for me. I expected better things. I don't know why, but just a huge letdown. We can't start anyone out of this game. Maybe, like you said, ETN should be good. We can sit on Brian Thomas Jr. I think we can expect better things out of that Jags offense going forward. I would hope. I think we can move on to this next game where Gardner Minshew and the boys go over to M&T Bank Stadium and they get the job done. Now, these guys went out there, had some Rizz. 0 run game. Absolutely nothing. Zamir White just can't do it. 9 carries for 24 yards, 2.7 average yards per carry. Not great. He did get 3 receptions for 14 yards, but he's not good. People were taking him way too high, as we said last week. Now, these aren't guys that are going to get it done at the gritty dive bars. This much we know. They're guys that spend their time at Marquee and Lavo out in Vegas throwing cash at $30 Red Bull vodkas and bottles for the ladies. They may not hit much, but they're there to have a good time. And to be honest, it's kind of fun to watch. I like watching Gardner Minshew. I don't know why. Something about him. What do you have to say about these Raiders?
Certainly something about Gardner Minshew. And let's not forget the phenom rookie tight end, Brock Bowers. 9 catches, 98 yards off 9 targets. Right now, the tight end position is so gross that a performance like this and last week's pretty solid game make you consider Brock Bowers as a top 5 option moving forward. So there's a reason this guy pulled his Georgia bird that we all saw on draft night. Absolute rocket, and it makes a lot of sense. Great Rizz coming out of Brock Bowers. Let's move over to the Ravens side. What do we make of the start to the season? Lamar Jackson looks okay, but just doesn't get you the win at home as a 9-point favorite moving into the game. Are we worried about him after putting up around 15 points in fantasy, but losing the game?
I still don't think so. I don't think so. I think Lamar, he's going to continue to be everything we touched on last week and everything we know Lamar to be. He's going to get you that rushing upside that's so valuable in fantasy football. Yeah, sure. His passing stats were not great again this week. But I mean, it's Lamar. You never know what he's going to do. He could break off for a massive play and you'll never see it coming. It's awesome. He's exciting to watch. I think they got kind of screwed over by the refs in this game a little bit. That late hit out of bounds was not great. The refs just continue to have a vendetta against Lamar. But from a fantasy perspective, Zay Flowers got 7 catches for 91 yards and a tug. You're starting him. You were always going to start him. Mark Andrews had a decent game. 4 grabs for 51. Not fantastic, not awful, kind of middle of the pack. But again, like you said, that this tight end position this year is absolute AIDS. But Mark Andrews gets you some solid points. What else do you have to say here, Chugs?
Yeah, I just want to touch on the other tight end in this game. likely, Iceman likely, only gets you 2 catches for 26 yards. So I'd imagine some of you actually started him. Let's kind of take a step back on the split in this tight end room right now and just keep starting Mark Andrews until we see another big target hog game out of the Iceman. So that's something to watch moving forward. But let's go ahead and move along and talk about the Jets getting their first win of the season in Nashville. That was another disgusting game. I watched most of it, and I'm really sad I did that. I absolutely hate watching the Jets. And Will Levis is pretty bummy. Despite he did Rizz down Gia. I can't even remember her last name, but that was sick. She broke up with him, obviously, but he definitely has some Rizz. So just need to see it translate into wins on the field. Do you want to go ahead and talk about these pretty mid Jets?
Sure. I mean, Brees Hall, great fantasy asset. He's always going to get you high teens, low 20s points, and he always has that potential for going even higher than that. You're not worried about Brees Hall. His offense runs through him pretty much. Garrett Wilson had kind of a down game, 4 catches for 57 yards. If you're looking at this and you have Brees Hall and you watch this game, you shouldn't be concerned about Braylon Allen getting 2 touchdowns, but you should absolutely be grabbing your handcuff, pick him up, throw him on your bench. Brees Hall, he gets injured. Braylon Allen will be their guy if that is to happen. So if you have Brees Hall in fantasy, I think you pick up Braylon Allen, and that gets rid of any worries that you have on injuries. Braylon looked pretty good. Outside of those 2 guys and Garrett Wilson, I mean, it's just this offense is not spectacular. I don't really have too many takeaways from any of Alan Lazard, Mike Williams, Tyler Conklin, or Malachi Corley, unless you have something to say there, Kinc Chugs. I think we can go over to the Titans.
Yeah, nothing on those bums. Just more about Nathaniel Hackett still not being able to call plays. I'm not quite sure this guy will ever coach again in the NFL after this season. It's just really pathetic. And hopefully Rodgers is getting up to the line and just audibling something for his guys, Brees and GW. But over on the Tennessee side, Pollard gets 5 catches for 40 yards off 6 targets, which is something we really need to look out for moving forward, considering that a lot of people drafted Tajay Spears for his receiving upside, and that hasn't really translated onto the field. So if Pollard continues this receiving upside, he turns into a really attractive borderline top 12 running back rest of season. So good game out of him. Calvin Ridley gets a touchdown, 2 touchdowns actually, 1 receiving, 1 rushing. So huge game from him. And really excited about that after a bit of a letdown last week. So you can go ahead and keep starting Calvin Ridley, but no one else should be started outside of those 2 guys in this piss poor offense. That's all on my end out of this game. So I think it's safe to say we can go talk about an absolute thriller in Minneapolis. SF coming to town. What a game that was. First of all, got to talk about the 97-yard touchdown pass to Justin Jefferson from the absolute stud, Sam Darnold. Get the home win, but Justin Jefferson goes out during the game with an injury, so that's never good when your offense essentially runs through this one player. So we'll have to wait on that. Implications coming out of potential injury would be you could potentially pick up Jalen Naylor, who gets a touchdown today and 50 yards on 3 receptions. So if Jefferson's out for a little bit, you could probably look to start Naylor if you need some depth at the wide receiver position. On the running back side, Ty Chandler pounds the rock 10 times, getting you 82 yards. This is a UNC back with a lot of talent running downhill. So I'm sure he's rostered in a lot of leagues, but just keep sitting on him if you are rostering him and monitor his usage out of the backfield. I'll let you talk about these 49ers now. What did you see out of Debo, Kittle, Ayuk, Mason, and Purdy this week?
Yeah. So main takeaway here, and same from last week, is that when CMC is out, Jordan Mason auto start. He gets a lot of volume. He got 20 carries today for 100 yards and one touchdown. He's an auto starter for as long as CMC is out. I don't think that was much of a question for many people with the O line that SF has. Outside of that, I mean, Deebo Samuel had a great game, 8 catches for 110 yards. Now, I was not someone that was hopeful for Deebo's fantasy upside, but he's seemingly doing his best to prove me wrong and convince people that I'm the idiot league mate. And it might be working. George Kittle, 7 catches for 76 yards and a touchdown. He's always one of those guys that's going to have either a really good game or just absolute piss poor, god awful 2 catches for 4 yards or some shit like that. It's a boomer bust guy. This just happened to be one of his boom weeks. Uh, he is what you expect out of George Kittle. He's expected to do this. It's always going to happen. Ayuk, extremely disappointing. Extremely disappointing. He waited so long to get that contract. Now he's got it. I think he just took the bag and he's not really that into it. I think he's got his money, so he's just kind of checked out. They're not really using him as much as you would hope where people were drafting him. This offense is just incredibly stacked. A lot of targets to spread around. You've got too many guys to get the ball to. This is just classic textbook 49ers. Anything from your end here to add to that, Chugs?
Yeah, a few things on the Brandon Ayuk point. This was a guy that I was really high on coming into the season, gets the big bag, and in an organization with a lot of different guys to pay, and they prioritize Brandon Ayuk. And he goes out there again and gets you sub 10 fantasy points. So I'm a little bit concerned now, to say the least. I think Deebo Samuel is clearly the target hog alongside George Kittle spike weeks. So I'm not even sure what to do with Ayuk. I guess I'll start him again next week. But if we keep seeing this piss poor performance out of him, you just got to try to trade him or look to other options on your bench. So very disappointing. And the 49ers losing at Minnesota to Sam Darnold is another concern. And we'll just have to see how they progress, while also hoping that Brandon Ayuk, who, by the way, is an absolute dog, gets back into the swing of things. Moving along now to my New England Patriots. Go Pats. I can't believe the loss today. I'm absolutely heartbroken. We look great out there, pounding the rock, bringing it back to old school football, rushing for 185 yards through Ramondre, stud, and Antonio Gibson, who breaks away for the long 45-yard rush. So just on the fantasy side of things, you just got to keep starting Ramondre, get you 81 yards and the touchdown alongside 2 receptions on 5 targets. So you really like the target volume there. He's a great running back in real life and fantasy. So keep doing your thing, Mondre. Yeah, don't start anyone else but Hunter Henry. Big game, big league game, 12 targets. Look to be the go-to guy in this offense and gets 109 yards. So I'm sure that Hunter Henry, Double H, isn't rostered in all your leagues. If he isn't, especially considering how disgusting this tight end position is, go pick him up and potentially look to start him moving forward. What a stud. Really great guy, too. Why don't you talk us through Geno Smith, Unc, and these Seahawks?
Yeah, Unc Geno. I did not think he was going to come into this year and do anything too impressive. I mean, he went out there today, threw the ball 44 times, completed the ball 33 times, 327 yards and a touchdown. Good performance out of Geno. Zach Charbonnet, not a great back. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to come out and say it. I don't think he's very good. I know you like him. I know you've liked him in the past. I don't think he's very good. Goes out there, 14 carries for 38 yards and a touchdown. He's not great. I mean, obviously, if you drafted Kenneth Walker and you picked up your handcuff, you're still going to keep him on your roster. You're still going to, I personally probably wouldn't start him maybe in a flex spot if I'm desperate in deeper formats. But from that running back room, I'm not too excited about Zach Charbonnet. DK Metcalf and JSN, though, wow, couple of big games out of the boys. 10 receptions for 129 for DK with a touchdown, and JSN grabs 12 balls for 117 yards. I mean, if Unk can continue to throw the ball pretty well and they can continue to come down with it, I mean, these guys, you can be excited about them. Definitely some startable flex plays here in Seattle. From your perspective, Kinc Chugs, what do you have to say about DK and JSN?
Yeah, DK, you keep starting him probably as your wide receiver too. So you're pumped up about his performance today. JSN, wow. This is the game we've been waiting years to see out of him in the NFL. Ever since he was a freshman at Ohio State, you're expecting big games on Sundays out of him, and you finally get it. 16 targets, 12 catches, and 117 yards. I have a hypothetical question for you. And
Yeah.
fantasy, would you trade Brandon Ayuk for JSN and a bag of spicy nacho Doritos?
Wow. Wow. Those are some great chibs. So you really have to take that into account there. On a day like today, when we're recording a pod and we're however many minutes in we are, I think I'm making that trade solely for chibs.
Yeah, I'd probably have to take that right now just because I would love some chips, especially spicy nacho Dorito, the best chip on the market.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's move along and talk about New Orleans going into Dallas and getting the job done. That might even be an understatement. What we saw was absolute dog walking of Micah Parsons, Jerry Jones, Dak Prescott, and Mike McCarthy. Pathetic performance out of them. But I think we got to give the Saints credit where credit is due. 44 points, over 40 points in consecutive games. And this time, who are they playing? The Cowboys, not the piss poor Panthers. So on the fantasy side of things, Alvin Kamara, 4 touchdowns and nearly 200 total yards. You drafted Kamara, you just can't believe your luck or sharpness, and he's going crazy. Wow. Alvin Kamara, back to his old ways. Now I wanted to talk briefly about last week's bum of the week, Chris Olave. He still doesn't really get there in fantasy, just 12 points off 6 targets. And I know they were pounding the rock a ton. They were pounding it over and over again because this game was over by the end of the first quarter. But even so, Derek Carr still has 243 passing yards, which is a lot for Derek Carr. And Olave isn't really on the right side of that history. So keep fading Olave. But your guy, Rashid Shaheed, goes out there again and gets you the huge game, almost 100 yards and 1 touchdown, including that 70-yard bomb, which, to be honest, I didn't know that Derek Carr had that in him. Anything to take away from this game? Are you going to be starting Rashid Shaheed on your team? I know you have him rostered.
Well, Kinc Chugs, let's just say I will be starting Rashid Shaheed. He is getting his play time on my team. I thought it was a sharp pick. You told me it was god awful. You said it was terrible. You were hating on Rashid Shaheed, but he might be the guy. He's pretty good, I guess. Seems like that was a sharp pick from fantasy, and if I do say so myself.
I'll have to admit, that was super sharp fantasy end, especially in best ball where you're drafting the hell out of him on underdog fantasy. So nice work there. Again, another sharp pick out of you and your guys. Let's go over and talk about Dallas now, where Dak Prescott throws for 2 picks off nearly 40 attempts, all while being behind in the game. So he's airmailing it out. CeeDee Lamb has a good fantasy week. 4 catches, 90 yards, and a touchdown, with Dak just pounding the ball through the air, trying to catch up to these Saints. And then on the running back side, just don't start in any of these guys or roster them. Rico Daddle, 7 carries, 30 yards. Ezekiel Elliott, 6 carries, 16 yards. And again, they're having to airmail the ball out, just chuck it all over the field because they're getting dog walked by the Saints. But it's clearly a split backfield, and neither of these guys seem to be particularly talented. So pretty much you're only playing Dak and CD in Dallas and continue to do so moving forward. But great week out of the Saints. Got to give credit to them. They look phenomenal. They might be the real deal in this NFC South, competing with Baker and those Buccaneers. Moving along now, we want to talk through, another horrendous game with the Giants going down to Maryland and taking on the Redskins. I'll let you start us off here on the game.
Wow. Thank you, Chugs, for letting me speak through this fantastic game. Clearly, the Giants have found their guy, Daniel Jones, throwing for 178 yards and 2 touchdowns with no picks. What a game out of Daniel Jones. Obviously, that is all false. That is his stat line, but he's not good. This offense is terrible. I don't know how you have Brian Ozempic Daboll not rostering a legitimate kicker. You have Graham Gano telling you that his groin hurts really, really bad, and you put him in the game anyway, and he gets hurt chasing down a returner. His hamstring, sure, different than the groin, like they were always saying, but that is not a legitimate excuse to not even pretend to roster another kicker. The big takeaway from this game, though, other than just horrible roster management out of the Giants, Malik Neighbors shows up. This is his welcome to the NFL game. 10 receptions, 127 yards, and a touchdown. Now, he did drop the ball on that 4th down play that ended up probably losing the Giants a game, but he looked fantastic. You can expect great things out of him going forward once they get a viable QB in who is probably Arch Manning. I'll give it back to you to speak through these Redskins. What do you have to say about them?
Yeah, let's talk through these Redskins. That's a super gritty Redskins win. Basically, it was the Giants pissing away that game in the fashion that they usually do so, led by Ozempic coach. Really pathetic out of them. So I don't really have much to talk through out of these Redskins other than Brian Robinson still being a smash hit out of that backfield, rushing for over 130 yards. Keep starting him and keep feeling really good about that. Do not start any of these pass catchers. Terry McLaurin gets 22 yards on 8 targets and 6 receptions, which is just a disgusting stat line. So just don't start him. Jaden Daniels is my fantasy QB. He looks okay, I guess. I mean, throws for 226 yards, but doesn't really get there with the lack of touchdowns and a quieter rushing game out of him compared to last week. So just keep starting him and look for him to progress and get a little bit better. But very happy for him to get the win this week out of these pathetic Giants.
Yep,
Okay.
Just a couple quick things to say here before we move on from this pathetic Giants game. With how we said how disgusting this tight end position is, Zach Ertz potentially viable. Now, 4 receptions for 62 yards isn't great, but he had a decent amount of fantasy points. So that's a startable tight end in this disgusting tight end season. The other huge fantasy takeaway, Austin Seibert. Wow, 22 points out of a Commander's kicker. The only man on the team to score a single point. Just fantastic. Let's move on.
Yeah, thanks for those great points. Got a little bit too baked and completely forgot. But I actually do have another thought on the pathetic Giants. What would you think about, as a former Giants fan, them drafting Shedeur Sanders at the 101 in the NFL draft and then bringing in Coach Prime to coach him up, old school way, up in the Giants? Would you like that? Would you become a fan again, or what are your thoughts around Coach Prime and Shador taking over the regime?
Well, well, the obvious. I don't really see John Mara ever doing anything like that, and I can't point to exactly why, but we will be touching more on Shador in a brand new segment at the end of the pod. So hold off on that one. We'll get into that, Kinc Chugs. Don't get too excited and blow your load. Let's move on to Baker versus Jared.
Let's do it. Two QBs with insane off-field and on-field Rizz. Baker shows why he is still him, getting the win on the road against these Lions. Did you all see that first down run with the juke? Put that man on the floor. Come on, Baker. Keep doing your thing. Not a great fantasy week, but we're still having him as a must-start quarterback. On the receiver room, Godwin crushes over 100 yards and the touchdown. So keep starting Godwin. He's phenomenal real-life NFL receiver and looks to be really good this year in fantasy as well. Mike Evans, a little bit disappointed, just about 10 points, no touchdowns, but we know who this guy is. He's still going to crush week in and week out if he gets that touchdown volume, but we know he's a target hog around the red zone, so nothing to worry about on that front. Why don't you take us over to David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta, and those receiver weapons?
Sure. I mean, let's think about the stat line from Jared Goff here. 34 completions on 55 attempts for 307 yards, no touchdowns through the air, and 2 picks. 55 attempts is a shitload. And you've got guys out here. You've got Amon-Ra St. Brown. You've got Jameson Williams. They're great. Solid weeks. JMO looks to be able to actually catch the ball now, which is fantastic. Finally coming into his own as a wide receiver in the NFL, and I'm excited about him. Amon-Ra St. Brown, another good week, 11 receptions for 119 yards. Nothing unsurprising. He's great. He's continued to be great. If your quarterback's slinging the ball 55 times, you can expect him to get you the fantasy points that you need out of him. And this backfield, again, this running back tandem, they're just good. They're just good. Jahmyr Gibbs, 13 carries for 84 yards. David Montgomery, 11 carries for only 35 yards, but he did have that rushing touchdown, and he also caught 4 balls for 35 yards. Jahmyr Gibbs, also 7 receptions for 22 yards. He's getting a lot of that volume. A lot of those checkdowns are going to Jahmyr Gibbs, and he didn't quite get you the yards today. You're getting the fantasy points you need out of him just on that alone in PPR formats. Sam Laporta, a bit disappointing. You expected slightly better Rizz out of him getting out there on the field, but to only put up a couple points, it's just not going to get the job done. Like we said, this tight end room is absolutely not this room, this league, this fantasy season for the tight end position is absolutely fucking disgusting. You don't want to touch it, but you have to. Sam Laporta, you're still going to start him every week. He probably will have a lot better weeks than this week. So you're not too worried, but just not great from Sam over in Detroit.
Yeah, Sam looks like he might just have Midwestern Iowa Rizz rather than that Jared Goff, Baker Mayfield, Miami, and LA type of Rizz that you really want out of your fantasy players. So really disappointed out of this corn-fed, burly, Jimison Rizz. And we're going to need to see a lot more production out of Sam Laporta if you want to see any returns on drafting him in probably the 3rd round. That's all the takeaways out of Baker's huge win up in Detroit. So let's go ahead and talk through another disgusting game. Indiana going up to Lambeau and getting crushed by Malik Willis, Josh Jacobs, and Coach LaFleur. So I was watching this game with one of the listeners of the podcast, Jared, and Jared's a Colts fan, so we had to watch the game despite it being not remotely entertaining. And I just want to say, AR put on, after I sung his praise last week, he put on one of the worst quarterback performances I've seen in a long time in this NFL. And I know they only lose by 6, but the game was not close at all the entire game. They just get a little gritty touchdown at the end. So let's talk through AR. 3 picks, 1 touchdown, garbage time touchdown, and 200 yards, most of which came in garbage time. I really like AR in fantasy for this season, but this guy still has a ton of learning to do, and he seems to be pretty hard-headed and not willing to listen to his coach Shane Steichen as much as he probably should. So keep starting him, but he still has a long way to go. Jonathan Taylor rushes for over 100 yards, as well as catching 2 balls out of the backfield for 32 yards. So he's still in a great position to be a RB1 in fantasy rest of season, and nice little performance out of him today. On the receiving side, our guy, the intellectual king, Alec Pierce, gets another touchdown and 5 receptions off 56 yards. Is it time to really start rostering Alec Pierce and potentially use him in an injury-depleted flex play? What do you think about that heady game by our guy, Alec Pierce?
Wow. I mean, we made it clear last week how much we like Alec Pierce. Just a great locker room guy, a guy you want to be around, a guy you would let date your daughter, even some would say. Alec Pierce, he might be legit kick Chugs. He could very well see some starts in my lineup this year, and I don't think I would feel bad about it at all. Alec Pierce, love the guy, like to see him play well, and I think he's going to continue to do that as long as AR can throw the ball within a somewhat catchable radius and not just throw a million picks.
Yeah, that seems to be what he can mostly do right now. But I will say Alec Pierce had an insanely heady play on one of the last drives of the game where basically AR threw a surefire pick, but it goes through the hands of Walker and falls right into the falling Alec Pierce's lap. So way to keep your eye on the ball and make a sharp play for your guys, Alec. Keep up the good work. Let's go ahead and talk about the pack show, led by Malik Willis this week, who has a phenomenal game with 12 completions off 14 attempts for 122 yards and a touchdown and no picks. That is really, really impressive. But the star of the show, of course, is Josh Jacobs with 32 carries for 151 yards. This guy looks like a potential league winner, especially with J Love out. And he just has a great ability to pound the rock and pound it well. So keep starting Josh Jacobs and look for him to crush for you this season in fantasy. Now, on the receiving room, again, Malik Willis. Yeah, he doesn't really spin the ball, as they say. He kind of just chucks it. So that's not going to produce good fantasy outcomes for these Green Bay receivers. And that's what you got this week. So you can keep stashing your guys like Jaden Reed, Romeo Dobbs, potentially Dontavian Wicks. But until Jay Love's back and healthy, you can kind of just sit on these guys for now. But nice little win up there to get the Packers on track for the successful season that all of us hope they're able to have this year. Let's go to what I thought was going to be the game of the week. My LA Rams going down to the desert, going to Glendale, and not getting the job done. No, sir. They get blown out in the first quarter, really the first 5 minutes of this game by KM1 and Maserati Marv. Within 5 minutes of the game, Marvin Harrison catches a sweet ball by KM1 into the back of the end zone for just his second career NFL catch, and it's a huge touchdown. This is the breakout game for Maserati Marv. Gives you 130 yards, 2 touchdowns off 4 receptions, and it could have been more. It could have been much more. But he closes the deal early, gets the win in the first quarter with KM1, and they just pound the rock. They pound the rock. So, takeaways here. If you panicked on Maserati Marv last week after we told you specifically not to, and you didn't start him, what can we say? What can we say? We're giving you all the sharp analysis. You just have to listen to it. So Maserati Marv looks to be a wide receiver one in fantasy rest of season. Great performance this week. And KM1, still that guy. Still him. There's a reason he was the number one pick. The Cardinals offense is legit. So keep starting all of your assets in this Cardinals offense. Anything to add fantasy end around the Cardinals?
No, I mean, just a great game all around from K1, James Conner, and Maserati Marv. You just have to be excited about this if you're a Cards fan. That was a great game out of Marvin Harrison Jr., and you've got to be excited. That's all I have.
Let's take it over now to these my LA Rams, rather. My squad, second squad, goes down and gets rinsed. So from a fantasy perspective, you know what you're going to get when you're getting absolutely rinsed. You're not going to get a lot. Kyron Williams looks super bad, super inefficient. 12 carries for 25 yards and a touchdown. And it looks like just 4 catches for 27 yards. So that's not going to get the job done for a guy you took at like 14 or 15. This is a banged up O-line, so you're going to have some issues there for opening the holes up for Kyron. So this is a guy you just have to be a little bit more bearish on moving forward until this team gets healthy and can get the offense in a bit more of a rhythm. The Cooper Kupp side of things, he actually gets injured. When Cooper Kupp gets injured, you can't be too optimistic on the timeline. So I'm really worried about the Rams, my Rams, as well as the fantasy assets here. Any thoughts around Matt Stafford's Rams?
No, just a disappointing game all around. I'm quite honestly a little surprised that Stafford didn't throw a pick today. You can come to expect Matt Stafford in a game where he should be airing it out. When you're down by a lot of points, you absolutely should be slinging the rock, and they only let him throw the ball 27 times. Pretty questionable in my opinion, but we'll see what we can see out of these Rams going forward. But I'm not horribly excited.
Nor am I. Let's move along now and talk about the Steelers going out there to Mile High Stadium in another game I unfortunately watched that was absolutely terrible and not even remotely entertaining. So I don't even really want to talk about this game other than Najee Harris is still kind of inefficient and doesn't catch the ball. So you get under 10 fantasy points from this guy. He's like one of my starting running backs. So really disappointing. And especially when this offense clearly isn't particularly sophisticated, I'm not too pumped up about those Steelers skill players. Just really quickly on the Denver side, I don't really think you need to start any of these guys. Javonte Williams looks like the blown out knees have gotten to his ability to rush the football because he only gets you 17 yards on 11 carries, the longest being right down the middle for a quick 5. You probably can't really start Javonte. And then Courtland Sutton only has 26 yards off 1 catch. Just because Bo Nix cannot throw the football more than 10 yards downfield, it's going to be difficult to have much upside with Sutton and any of these other pieces around Bo Nix and overrated Coach Payton.
Yeah, I cannot figure out why, for the life of me, they won't give Jaleel the bulk of the work in that backfield. It does not make sense to me because, as we know, he's absolutely electric. He might be one of the best backs in the league, but they just won't give him the work. And I can't quite figure out why.
That's a super sharp point as a huge Jaleel McLaughlin fan. And trust me, I love Javonte, UNC guy, but look, man, when you blow out your knee about 4 or 5 times, you're not going to be a particularly effective back. So let's give Jaleel a shot. Why not give a little bit more check down options for the check down king, Bo Nix, who does not look to be remotely good and potentially might have to move over to our guy, Zach Wilson. We'll just have to see what happens out there at Mile High. Let's go ahead and talk about the game of the week. Bengals getting robbed yet again at Arrowhead. by the crooked NFL and the Kansas City Chiefs. This was a pretty entertaining game to say the least, but a few disappointments on the fantasy football side of things for the Bengals. The running backs don't look to be startable at all. Both get under 35 rushing yards and a little bit of a split backfield. And then Jamar Chase, super disappointing, just 4 receptions for 35 yards and 5 targets in a receiving room where Mike Gesicki leads the team in targets and receptions and yards. So I'm not really sure what to make of this. I think you're fine being really high on Chase moving forward, but yeah, this is not a great performance out of him.
Yeah, Mike Gesicki just might be the more trustworthy guy as a ball catcher in Cincinnati.
Great Rizz too. That gritty he did, wow, that guy has talent. Might want to
Yeah,
go pick him up and look to start him in the
yeah,
absolutely disgusting tight end situation out there in the NFL right now. Well, that brings us to Chicago, Houston, Sunday Night Football. Uh, yeah, no, it's still the first quarter. So, yeah, maybe we'll save that for next week and go ahead and talk about the Rizz of the week. Let's talk through Rizz of the week and fantasy. Who is going to win the player with the most impressive Rizz out there on the field this week?
yeah. So now on the honorable mentions, you know, we were thinking about giving it to Kyler Murray. For obvious reasons, we cannot do that. So we also had to think about giving it to Aiden Hutchinson with his 4.5 sacks. Now, unfortunately, this award is limited to skill players, so we cannot award it at this current moment until next week when we change that rule. But Aiden Hutchinson, great performance out there, a lot of years on the field, but we just have to give it to our guy, Baker Mayfield, for his Rizz performance this week. Just absolutely fantastic. Like Kinc Chugs mentioned, that that first down run, whew, whew, that juke was insane. You got to give him the award this week. Just tremendous Rizz.
Yeah, he just doesn't miss. My goodness. This is the point man that everyone is begging to go out with. I would do almost anything for a night in downtown Tampa with Baker Mayfield running point. I can't get enough of him. I love him. He might be my favorite quarterback until Drake May becomes a starter up here in New England. And Showtime Baker is back. Great Rizz this week, Baker. There's a reason you pull all the girls at Oklahoma, well, and Texas Tech, and Cleveland, and Carolina. But now Tampa, you're clearly killing it at the bars. Good stuff, Baker. Now let's talk through the player that showed the worst, the most awful Rizz at the bars this weekend. Who is going to receive that terrible award?
Yeah. So Bo Nix, Sean Payton, those guys put up a performance that really makes you want to give them the least Rizz of the week. Unfortunately, no one was drafting Bo Nix. Obviously, he's not good. He's not a startable quarterback in fantasy, probably not even in the NFL. But we had to give the least Rizz of the week to Sam Laporta. Man, man, you really expect him to get out there and clean up in the bars, but he's just not getting it done this week. That's fine, I guess. But he went out there, he got sloppy drunk, and he was trying to Rizz down the fat friend. So just a horrible effort out of Sam Laporta.
Yeah. Sam Laporta put on some Midwestern cornfield Iowa type Rizz. He basically just drank grain alcohol in his buddy's garage before going out to a local pool hall where he blacked completely out, doesn't remember anything, and then couldn't even get home, but getting behind the wheel of his car and driving. So that was completely pathetic out of Sam Laporta. Might just have that gritty Midwestern Rizz rather than that I don't even know what to call it. That Detroit Rizz. Yeah, that was awful. All right. Sam, gonna need a little bit more out of you, but let's get back to some good analysis here with the biggest risers and fallers in fantasy football this week. And fantasy, who are some big risers for you?
Yeah, I mean the one-on-one riser of the week, Josh Jacobs. For the foreseeable future, with Jordan Love out, you have to start Josh Jacobs. He's going to get 30 to 40 carries a game, and he's going to get you the fantasy points that you need.
For sure. Love that out of Josh Jacobs. Another guy rising our list is Devon Achane. Crushes it again this week. And so moving forward, keep it up with Devon Achane, and you might have gotten yourself a league winner for those of you that drafted him. Another riser is going to be Baker Mayfield. This is the time to buy. Disappointing week from a fantasy perspective, so go fleece your idiot league mates and get Baker Mayfield at your QB1. Any other risers you want to talk through?
Yeah, just one last one. Quickly want to touch on Keaton Mitchell. That's all I have to say. Keaton Mitchell is one of the biggest risers of the week for me.
Great point and fantasy. I can't believe we forgot our guy, Keaton Mitchell. Put him on your IR and just wait for the return. Big breakout game incoming, probably in about 10 weeks when he's back on the field. Now let's talk through the waiver plays. This is where you make your money in fantasy football, fleecing your idiot league mates with fab dollars and getting guys like our first pick, Braylon Allen. Crazy premium handcuff. Your first round pick, Breece Hall. So if you're a Breece Hall owner, definitely roster him because he has league winning upside if something were to happen to Breece. And moving forward to the Pats, double H's. Go pick up double H's at the tight end position and potentially start him if you drafted Sam Laporta. Another tight end I think you want to talk through here and fantasy. Who would that be?
Yeah, I mean, this is just a guy with fantastic Rizz. Of course, I'm talking about Mike Gesicki out in Cincinnati. He's going to go out there and he might get you some points. He might be a startable tight end. So if you're out there on waivers looking for a tight end in this disgusting tight end position, maybe think about picking up yourself a little Mike Gesicki.
Might want to get on Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki is right. Okay, let's move along now and talk about the bum of the week. This one is a little bit different because thankfully you cannot start this guy in your fantasy football roster. But of course, we were talking about Ozempic Coach. Ozempic Coach, I just can't even believe that you knew your kicker was injured and you didn't activate one off the practice squad, and you got Daniel Jones going for 2 after the couple of touchdowns that he managed to have today. Yeah, you lost your squad, your owner, your quarterback the game this week, Ozempic Coach, and thank God we're not able to put you in our RB1 spot on ESPN Fantasy.
So I think he might get you some good goal line carries if you were to start him in the RB1 position. But yeah, Ozempic Coach Brian Daboll, bum of the week.
Now that's out of the way, we can talk about something a little bit more positive, and that's your comeback player of the week. Who might that be? And fantasy.
Huh. Huh. Well, there's one here that I think we have to consider, but I don't think it has any fantasy implications given you cannot start him at all. That is, of course, Damar Hamlin going out there making plays for his Bills, and just some would say he was lights out. Now, who would be comeback player of the week for you, Kinc Chugs, if you agree or disagree with me?
Well, first of all, that was super sharp analysis and great job thinking outside the box and going with Damar Hamlin. Not sure which is out there actually playing. But I think traditionally we only do one player in the comeback player of the week segment. So I guess we can just stick to Demir or DeMar Hamlin, whichever one was actually on the field last
Yeah,
Thursday night. Wow.
great,
Okay.
great sharp analysis there, King Chug.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Next, we have a brand new segment for you all that we're super excited about. This is called the Rizz Roundup, where Chugs and N go through the Hinge Rizz roller coaster they experienced during that week. So, just as a background, a lot of you all were asking us after the first episode why we don't talk about IRL normal Rizz rather than football Rizz. So that got us thinking. That's a great idea, viewers. We should talk about real, actual Rizz to help you clean up a little bit better at the bars as well as in your ESPN Fantasy League. So, in particular, this segment is only about Hinge Rizz rather than real, actual Rizz. And the reason we want to talk through this is because the summer is coming to an end. The bars are getting less crowded. Winter's coming. You might have to rely on those virtual Rizz plays as the bars get pretty mid and the talent goes away for the winter. So we resolved to do that. We assessed our own personal Rizz, started grinding Hinge for the next few weeks, and we'll recap that for you all each week in the Rizz Roundup. Let's start with you, N Fantasy. What worked for you in your new Hinge plays?
Wow, what a week, and what a great intro for our new segment there, King Chug. I'm very excited to get into this one, and very excited for you to follow along on our Rizz journey. My week was an absolute Rizz roller coaster. While recording last week's pod, I had some impeccable Rizz, and I managed to get a phone number. Now, me, myself, I'm a pretty smart guy. So I'm going to diligence that phone number every time I get one on Hinge, as you all should. Did the whole Snapchat reverse lookup. If you can't figure it out, Google it. When I saw her name pop up next to a dude Bitmoji, I was not excited. I was very, very scared. So I had one of my Rizz colleagues call this phone number in the morning. We got no answer. We call it 2, 3, 4 times. No answer. So I am not happy. I thought I was getting catfished by a dude. Performed an additional reverse lookup on the phone number and found the same dude's name. Now, in this situation, you have to remember to keep your cool because there could still be Rizz in these situations. Now, for a beginner, unlike myself, it may be intimidating, but you just have to keep going. You have to keep trying to Rizz, even if you think it might be a dude. You just have to spit some game. So I hit her back with the, "That's crazy. You have the same phone number as my boy. Insert dude's name here." Wow. She goes, "I'm so sorry. I did not mean to do that. I was super big. Here's my real number." And now I have a date with her this week, and we will circle back next week on what happens. But I am quite optimistic.
You're up huge, Fantasy N. That's an insane story. I'm sure our viewers would agree. It seems like you had that persistence to keep going, despite thinking, huh, this could be a dude. So that showed some really, really gutsy Rizz there. And I hope it pays off. And I know it will this Wednesday. How can I
Yeah,
even follow that up? What to
man.
say?
What
Well, I'll tell you
to
all.
say?
This week, or a couple days ago, Fantasy N and I were talking about different potential Rizz plays. And I decided to use the play call Grown-Ups Rizz. It's super simple. I'm sure you all are familiar intimately with the blockbuster Adam Sandler comedy Grown Ups. So I just asked her, hey, have you seen Grown Ups? Said, yes, of course. And then I explained to her how I've seen it over 50 times. And she was super impressed, super impressed. Clearly, I have great taste in film, and she definitely appreciated that. So just risked her down the grown-ups way, got a little number. So we're going to look to get something on the books for this Friday or Saturday. And that's it from my end with the grown-ups, Rizz, with the new hinge plays of the week, starting again for this fall to help us clean up a little bit better when summer ends and the bars shut down. Anything else you want to add from the Rizz side of things from this Rizz roundup segment?
I mean, just a rock solid week out of the fellas. I mean, we're thinking outside the box here. You guys should take notes on how we're rizzing and try to employ similar strategies in your day-to-day lives on Hinge. I have to say, I was very, very impressed by the grown-ups Rizz. I had high hopes, and the fact that it panned out is just the cherry on top. It just goes to show, if you know your Adam Sandler films, you can get laid probably. Now, Kinc Chugs, let's move on to another brand new segment, our weekly mailbag. How about you kick us off with the first one, Kinc Chugs?
Yeah, let's go ahead and unpack this mailbag. So our first question comes from the CFP College Football Channel, and they're asking, does the CFP creep have Rizz now? So if you all aren't familiar, the CFP show is our channel's other program, and that's going to be a weekly college football betting show where the sharp analysts over there, CD Spreads and the Creep, break down big games for you and help you clean up a little bit better in your DraftKings account. And that comes out every Friday moving forward for the next 14 or so weeks, however long the season is. And we really recommend you check that out, give it a like, and help your DraftKings balance go up. So back to the question, does the CFP Creep, one of the hosts of the show, have Rizz now? Oof. Does the CFB Creep have Rizz? That's to remain to be seen. He flew in his current home bird from Columbus, tried to clean up, I guess, in the city. Things had not been going well. It was getting very bleak. So he did the old flyer out play, and it looks like it paid off. So am I gonna say that the CFP Creep has Rizz when he has to fly them out from Columbus, Ohio to New York City to clean up? No, the CFP Creep does not have Rizz now. Crazy question, but let's move along now to the next question here. If you're able to take a look at that fantasy end.
Yeah, now this one comes in by a user named CheenPod at CheenPod. Do you think Kay Adams is going to break up with Daniel Jones after the loss to the Skins? Now, what a great question. As we know, Daniel Jones apparently has that creepy eye Rizz and Rizz down Kay Adams to be his girl. Now, do we think that this game is a game breaker for Daniel Jones's Rizz? We didn't even know he had Rizz to begin with at the start of the season. And now we find out he's rizzing down Kay Adams in a game where he played actually serviceably well. You think that ruins his Rizz with Kay Adams? I would have to say that is a little bit of a stretch in my view. I think that he will continue to Rizz her down and lay the pipe where it needs to be laid. But if he did get cut off by Kay Adams, you'd have to blame that entirely on the obesity epidemic in this country. Ozempic coach, he can't even think straight. The Ozempic's going straight to his head. Doesn't even roster a healthy kicker for no real reason. Relies on Daniel Jones going for two and loses the game as a result. You have to blame this on Ozempic coach if that happened, and it would be a real travesty to our community. Anything to add there, Kinc Chugs? Do you have a different take?
I agree. Daniel Jones just has that Duke frat guy Rizz. Nothing too good out of him. So it's a kind of a miracle he managed to pull K Adams, but realistically, he just did it with creepy eye Rizz. Nothing too crazy out of him there. So I think he's good for the next few weeks. We can go ahead and move along to the next question submitted by Livy Lover 123 at Gay for Micah Parsons. Okay, it's got to be a Cowboys fan there. Question is, do you, Chugs, and Fantasy N think about Jaden Daniels' future on the NFL field, but also as a potential player of the week candidate? Oh, the Rizz Award of the Week candidate. Huh. Some are saying JD has crazy Rizz. Okay, this is an interesting one. I honestly think that Jaden Daniels does have a lot of Rizz. I'm just not sure I'd ever feel comfortable throwing in him in that spot. What do you think?
I think we need to see a lot more out of him, but personally, not a guy I would trust to be a Rizz player of the week. At this point, we haven't seen a whole lot of his game, but as we discussed earlier, Kinc Chugs, I think a guy like him, his Rizz, is very hard for us to estimate. Something about him, something about his Rizz style is just very different from a guy like us. So, me personally, while we could see him potentially being a future Rizz candidate of the week in a different scenario, I personally do not and would not expect Jaden Daniels to ever be the Rizz player of the week.
Agreed. Agreed. Let's go over to the next question now. I'll let you take a stab at that one from CheenPod at CheenPod.
Yeah, this one obviously, like Kinc Chug said, submitted by user CheenPod at CheenPod. Looking forward to the draft. Does Shador have enough on-field Rizz to overcome the handicaps he was born with? Huh. I'm not really sure what to make of this question. I don't really know what they mean. I'm assuming that they're referring to the attitude that Dion passed down to him. And to that end, I'm not quite sure. I personally would not expect him to ever be a high quality Rizz player on the NFL field if those are the handicaps we're talking about. I think he might be a little bit too much of a diva for the NFL. And for guys like the Giants who are likely to select a quarterback next year, I don't know how you trust him enough to start him. Any differing opinion there, Kinc Chugs?
No, I think you covered it nicely. I'm not too sure Malik Neighbors and Shador Sanders should be in the same locker room. Just don't know if they're going to be able to resonate with everyone. So potentially not a good play to bring in Shador to the Giants, but could do well somewhere else. Let's go to the next pod up. Okay, again, submitted by CheenPod at CheenPod. Looking forward to the draft. Does Arch have enough Rizz to take Quinn's job? Okay, this is an interesting one for sure. As a borderline Texas fan, going down to the game in 2 weeks against Mississippi State, so can't wait to see Arch and hopefully Quinn, but we'll see. Do I think that Arch has enough Rizz to take Quinn's job? No. Quinn's Rizz is insane. I know you all have seen him in those new Dr. Pepper ads. This guy's on a huge soda commercial. Crazy Rizz. And he puts it all out there on the field with a sweet arm, tat sleeve, on his throwing arm, which looks super sick. And it's definitely good Rizz down there in Texas. So no, I wouldn't expect that at all. To have Arch come in and replace Quinn.
Yeah, I mean, I could go here and there on this one, but ultimately I would have to defer to the experts over at the CFB RD betting show, The Creep and CD Spreads, airing at Friday night weekly. I guess we can move on here to the next question submitted by user Baby Yoshivas, aka at Josh Allen Knob Gobbler. Daniel Carlson, underrated Rizz player of the week? Question mark. Are tight ends a lost position in fantasy? Now, King Chugs, I know you have strong opinions on how disgusting this tight end position is, so I'll hand this one over to you.
Yeah, I guess we could start on the tight end portion of this question. Are tight ends a lost position in fantasy? Yes. You drafted guys like Sam Laporta in the third round, Travis Kelce in the third round, and they're getting you 5, 6, 7, 8 points a game. So, yeah, if you were all in on tight ends, not named McBride early on, yeah, it's probably lost for you. Good question, though. I'll let you take on this one. Says Daniel Carlson, underrated Rizz player of the week. Really like that point.
Yeah, that is a sharp point. Daniel Carlson, I like the guy. He had some pretty good Rizz out there on the field. Again, to this point, the rule has been that we were only sticking with skill positions for the Rizz player of the week. So Daniel Carlson may have to miss out on the Rizz player of the week this week. But looking forward, I think you can expect to see him potentially take the Rizz player of the week if he puts up a pretty good Rizz performance and cleans up at the bars.
For sure. I'm sure Lavo and Marquis are always pumped to see Danny C walk in those doors about 3, 4 a.m.
Yeah.
Well, unless you want to cover anything else, I think that's it from our end. This has been the Rizz Zone Week 2 Fantasy Recap. Thank you all so much for tuning in and looking forward to hearing all of your questions as they come into the mailbag this week.
Bolt up.